It started with a choice. A single, deliberate choice. One that she made knowing exactly what it meant. Friday night, she sat across from me at the dinner table, twirling her fork in her pasta like this was any other night. But I knew better. There was something different about her, a quiet defiance in the way she held herself. Like she was daring me to say something. Like she already knew she would win. I had warned her. Clear as day. You go to that party and you don't come back the same woman. She had smiled. Not in a sweet, reassuring way. Not even in a guilty, apologetic way. No. It was smug. Condescending. Like I was a child throwing a tantrum over something I couldn't understand. It's just a party. You're overreacting. Overreacting. I had let it go then, but inside, something was coiling tight. A feeling I didn't recognize yet. Something ugly, something restless. Saturday night came. She didn't even pretend to hesitate. No fake debate, no last-minute guilt. She took her time getting ready, doing her makeup with the kind of precision she hadn't bothered with in months. She picked a dress I'd never seen before, tight, short red. A color she never wore for me. And then, just like that, she was gone. Out the door. Not a single glance back. I sat there, staring at the space she left behind, the last traces of her perfume lingering in the air. The silence was suffocating. It wasn't sadness, it wasn't even anger yet. It was something colder. Then my phone buzzed. A message. Not from her. From someone else. Someone I never expected. You need to come outside. Now. And that was the moment everything shifted. I stared at the message, my pulse thrumming in my ears. You need to come outside. Now. No name. No explanation. Just urgency. For a moment I hesitated. I should have ignored it. Should have stayed inside, let the night rot away in silence. But something inside me, the same thing that had been gnawing at me since she first brought up that party, wouldn't let me. I grabbed my jacket and stepped outside. The night was thick. The air heavy with that late summer warmth that made everything feel slower, stickier. My street was quiet, just the occasional flicker of a porch light, the distant hum of a car passing by. But then I saw him, Ryan. I hadn't spoken to him in years. We used to be close once. Back when things were simpler, before life had pulled us in different directions. But now he stood at the edge of my driveway, hands in his pockets, shoulders tense. What the hell are you doing here? I asked. He didn't answer right away. His jaw clenched like he was trying to figure out how to say whatever was sitting on his tongue. And then, finally, you need to come with me. Something in his voice made my stomach twist. I didn't ask questions. I just followed. We got into his car. The air inside thick with something unspoken. I watched the streetlight streak past the windshield as we drove. The city stretching out in front of us like an unraveling thread. Finally, I broke the silence. Where are we going? Ryan exhaled, gripping the wheel like it was the only thing keeping him steady. The hotel. A pit formed in my stomach. There was only one hotel that mattered tonight. The one where the party was being held. I didn't speak, didn't move, just stared ahead. The weight of what was coming pressing down on me like a fist to the chest. Minutes felt like hours. And then we were there. A sleek, high-rise building. Its windows glowing warm against the dark sky. The entrance was buzzing. Couples arriving, laughter spilling out into the night. The air thick with expensive perfume and something else. Something desperate. Ryan didn't park. He just pulled up to the curb and turned to me. His face was set, eyes dark. You're gonna want to see this for yourself. My heart was a drum in my ribs as I stepped out of the car. And then I saw her. Not inside. Not upstairs. Not at the party. No, she was outside. With him. And what I saw next changed everything. She wasn't supposed to be out here. She was supposed to be upstairs. At the party. Doing whatever the hell she swore was just harmless fun. But there she was, standing outside the hotel entrance, her body angled toward him. I didn't recognize the guy right away. Tall, dark hair, sharp suit. He looked like the type that thought he owned every room he walked into. The type that didn't ask for things, just took them. And my wife, she wasn't just standing next to him. No, that would have been too easy, too forgivable. She was laughing. That laugh. The one I hadn't heard in months. The one she used to save for me. And then she touched his arm. Lightly, casually. Like it was nothing. Like it was natural. I don't even remember moving. 1 second, I was standing there, frozen in the shadows. The next, I was walking straight toward them, my pulse pounding so hard I could feel it in my teeth. She saw me first. And the way her face changed? That's what did it. That's what flipped the switch. She didn't look guilty. She didn't look ashamed. She looked annoyed. Like I was the problem. Like I was the one embarrassing her. The guy? He barely reacted. Just glanced at me, cool and unaffected, like I was some minor inconvenience. And then she spoke. What are you doing here? Not oh my god, this isn't what it looks like. Not I can explain. Just that. What am I doing here? I felt my jaw clench so hard I thought my teeth might crack. Who the hell is this? I asked, voice low, controlled. She scoffed, actually scoffed, and rolled her eyes. Oh my god, don't do this. The guy finally spoke, his voice smooth, rehearsed. We were just talking, man. Man. Like we were buddies. Like this wasn't my wife standing next to him, looking like she belonged there. Ryan was behind me now, close enough that I could feel him ready to intervene if things went sideways. But I wasn't thinking about him. I wasn't thinking about anything except her. I stepped closer, locking eyes with her. So this is what you meant by just a party? She crossed her arms. You're being dramatic. Dramatic. That word hit me harder than a punch ever could. I stared at her, at the woman I thought I knew, and realized. She wasn't even trying to lie. She wasn't scrambling for an excuse. She wasn't backpedaling. Because she didn't care. Not about me. Not about our marriage. Not about any of it. And then she said it. The words that would seal everything. You don't own me. I didn't even recognize my own voice when I spoke. No, I don't. And just like that, the last piece of whatever we had left snapped. The space between us felt like a battlefield, but only one of us was bleeding. She stood there, arms crossed, lips pressed together in a tight, unimpressed line, like I was the one making a scene. Like I was the one who had something to answer for. Ryan shifted beside me, his presence a silent warning. He knew me well enough to recognize the edge in my voice, the way my fists clenched at my sides. But I wasn't going to hit anyone. No, that would have been too simple. Too satisfying. I wanted the truth. I wanted to hear her say it. So, this is what we're doing now? I said, my voice steady, controlled. We're not even pretending anymore? She let out a sharp breath, shaking her head like she couldn't believe I was still standing there. Oh my god, can you not? Right now? In public? I felt something inside me twist. She didn't care that she got caught. She cared that it was happening here, where people could see. The guy beside her, whoever the hell he was, finally had the nerve to step in like he was protecting her from me. Look, man, he said, raising his hands like I was some unstable idiot about to explode. We don't have to do this. I turned my head slowly, locking eyes with him. I don't know who the hell you are, I said, voice even. But if you don't walk away right now, we're going to have a different kind of problem. His smirk faltered. Good. Because I meant it. I wasn't the kind of guy who threw punches first, but there was something about the way he looked at me, calm, unaffected, entertained, that made me want to break something. Her, though? She wasn't concerned at all. In fact, she laughed. Not nervous. Not uncomfortable. Just amused. Oh, come on, you're embarrassing yourself. That was it. That was the moment it all clicked. She wasn't sorry. She wasn't even pretending to be sorry. Because, in her mind, she hadn't done anything wrong. I stared at her, really looked at her, and saw the truth for what it was. She hadn't just made a mistake. This wasn't some one-time slip, some moment of weakness. This was who she was now. Or maybe, just maybe, this was who she had always been. And I had just been too blind, too trusting, too stupid to see it. Ryan must have sensed something shift in me because he finally spoke, his voice low, steady. Let's go. I nodded. But before I turned away, I looked at her one last time. She was already pulling out her phone, texting, dismissing me like I was nothing more than an inconvenience she could block out. And that was when I realized she was already gone. She had made her choice. Now it was time for me to make mine. The drive home was silent. Ryan didn't speak, and I didn't ask him to. There was nothing left to say. I sat in the passenger seat, staring out at the dark streets blurring past, my mind caught in a loop. Not of what had just happened, not even of her standing outside that hotel with him, but everything that came before it. Every moment that should have been a warning. I saw it all so clearly now. The sudden shift in her attitude. Like being married was something boring she had to endure. The way she started guarding her phone, turning the screen away from me, laughing at messages she never explained. The nights she came home late, smelling like expensive perfume that wasn't hers. The way she looked through me instead of at me, like I was furniture, something in the background of her life rather than a part of it. And worst of all, the fact that I had let it happen. I had seen the cracks forming and told myself they were nothing, that all marriages went through phases, that it was stress, boredom, a rough patch, that she just needed time. But it wasn't time she needed. It was freedom. Not the kind where you find yourself or figure out who you are. No, she wanted freedom from consequences. The ability to do whatever the hell she wanted without facing the fallout. And tonight, I had given her exactly that. I had walked away. Not because I forgave her. Not because I was weak. But because I was done. When Ryan pulled up to my house, I sat there for a moment, staring at the front door. It felt different now. Less like home. More like a place I had been staying out of habit. Ryan exhaled, gripping the wheel. You gonna be okay? I almost laughed. Not tonight. He nodded, not pushing, not offering empty reassurances. Just letting the words settle. I opened the door and stepped out, the night air pressing heavy against my skin. Then he said something that made me pause. She'll come back, you know? I looked at him. I don't want her to. And that was the truth. I shut the door and walked up to my house, but I didn't go inside right away. I just stood there, staring at the place where we had lived. Where she had laughed, fought, kissed me, lied to me. This house had seen it all. And soon it would see something new. A version of me that didn't belong to her anymore. I stepped inside and closed the door behind me, but the silence was different now. It wasn't comforting. It wasn't peaceful. It felt hollow. Like the walls themselves knew what had happened and were waiting for me to react. But I didn't. Not yet. I moved through the house on autopilot, my body tense, my hands shoved deep into my pockets as if that would stop them from shaking. Not with sadness. Not even with anger. With clarity. For the first time in a long time, everything was clear. I had spent months, maybe years, fighting for something that wasn't real. Clinging to a woman who had already let go of me long before she ever walked into that party. I just hadn't seen it. Or maybe deep down I had. Maybe I had felt it in the way she stopped saying goodnight, in the way her touch became something rare, something distant. Maybe I had known long before tonight that I was holding on to nothing. And now here I was. Alone in the house we had built together. A house filled with memories that weren't mine anymore. I made my way to the bedroom. Her side of the closet was still full, shoes lined up neatly, dresses hanging like they were waiting for her to come back. Her perfume sat on the dresser, the scent still lingering in the air. But she wasn't coming back. Not really. Ryan had been wrong about that. She might physically walk through that door again, but the version of her that I had loved? That version had been gone for a long time. I sat down on the edge of the bed and stared at the floor, my mind running ahead of me, making decisions before I could even catch up. I needed to be done. Not just emotionally, not just mentally, I needed to end it completely. That's when I grabbed my phone. No hesitation. No second guessing. I pulled up a contact I hadn't spoken to in months. A divorce lawyer. My fingers hovered over the screen for only a second before I hit call. It rang once. Twice. Then a voice answered. Hello? I took a breath, steadying myself. I need to file for divorce. And just like that, the next chapter began. The decision should have felt heavier. Should have made me pause, made me doubt, made me hesitate. Didn't. Felt like cutting off a dead limb. Painful, maybe, but necessary. The only real choice left. The lawyer's voice was calm, professional. I understand. Do you want to come in and discuss your options? No, my voice was steady. I already knew my options. I didn't need a long conversation filled with legal jargon and cautionary warnings. I just want it done. A pause. Then, understood. I'll send over the paperwork first thing in the morning. I hung up. That was it. No dramatic breakdown, no surge of regret. Just silence. And in that silence, something inside me finally settled. I wasn't waiting anymore. Not for an explanation, not for an apology, not for a miracle. She was gone. And now I was making sure she stayed that way. I slept like a man with nothing left to lose. Deep, dreamless. When I woke up, the first thing I did was check my phone. And there it was. 2 missed calls from her. 1 text. I stared at the screen for a long time before opening it. Her "we need to talk." That was it. No apology. No guilt. Just a demand. I didn't reply. Instead, I got up, showered, and went about my morning like nothing had changed. Because in my mind, it hadn't. She had made her choice. Now it was my turn. By noon, I had the papers in my inbox. I printed them, read over every line, and signed without a second thought. As I was finishing, my phone rang again. Her. This time I answered. "What do you want?" My voice was flat, emotionless. She exhaled sharply, like I was already exhausting her. "Can you stop being a child and just talk to me?" I almost laughed. I was the child? Talk about what? I asked. How you walked out on me. How you lied. How you threw everything away like it meant nothing. Oh my God. Are you seriously still mad about that? That was it. That was the moment I felt whatever was left between us die. She wasn't sorry. She wasn't ashamed. She was bored. Like I was a minor inconvenience in her life. Like my pain was just an overreaction she had to deal with before moving on to something more interesting. I closed my eyes, exhaling slowly. I sent you the divorce papers. Silence. Then, are you kidding me? No, she scoffed. You're seriously doing this? Because I went to a party? No, my voice was calm, steady. Because you stopped being my wife a long time ago. Another silence. This one longer. I could almost hear the gears turning in her head. She thought she still had control. That if she pushed hard enough, I'd break. But I didn't. Finally, she spoke. Fine. One word. No argument. No fight. Because she had never really wanted this marriage in the first place. And now, she was someone else's problem. The call ended with that single, dismissive fine. No anger, no sadness, just indifference. And somehow that hurt more than if she had screamed at me. I stared at my phone for a long time after she hung up, waiting for something to hit me. Regret, second thoughts, some last shred of hesitation. But there was nothing. Just quiet acceptance. I had spent so much time thinking that if our marriage ever ended, it would be some earth-shattering, soul-crushing moment. That it would destroy me. Instead, it felt like taking a deep breath after holding it in for too long. I was free. The rest of the day passed in a strange haze. I sent the signed divorce papers back to my lawyer, made myself a cup of coffee, and sat at the kitchen table, our kitchen table, staring at nothing in particular. This house had always been ours. Every piece of furniture, every framed picture on the wall, every scuff mark on the floor was something we had built together. Now it felt foreign, like I was squatting in someone else's life. I needed to get out. I grabbed my keys and walked out the door without a plan. Just a restless energy pushing me forward. I drove without thinking, letting the roads guide me. And somehow I ended up at Ryan's place. He opened the door, took one look at me, and stepped aside. Come in. I walked in, and before I could say anything, he handed me a beer and dropped onto his couch. So, he said, taking a sip of his own drink, you finally did it. I nodded, running a hand over my face. She didn't even care. He scoffed. Of course she didn't. That's the difference between you and her. You gave a damn. She didn't. I stared down at the bottle in my hand, tracing the label with my thumb. How the hell did I not see it? Ryan leaned back, shaking his head. Because you wanted to believe she was the person you fell in love with. But that version of her? That version doesn't exist anymore. I exhaled. He was right. And the worst part? I didn't even miss her. I missed the idea of her. The person I thought she was. The person I had convinced myself she still could be. But she wasn't that person. Maybe she never was. Ryan studied me for a second before setting his beer down. All right, enough of this sad divorce guy energy. You need to get out of your head. And do what? He smirked. I don't know. But sitting around replaying the past isn't gonna fix anything. He had a point. I wasn't sad about losing her. I was sad about how much of myself I had lost trying to keep her. And now, I was ready to get myself back. I left Ryan's place that night feeling lighter. Not happy. Not even relieved. Just lighter. Like I wasn't carrying around the dead weight of a woman who had stopped being mine long before I even realized it. For the first time in months, maybe even years, I didn't care where she was or what she was doing. She had spent so long acting like she had one foot out the door. And now I was the one walking away. And I wasn't looking back. The next few days passed in a blur of emails, legal paperwork, and small realizations that hit me when I least expected them. Like how I no longer had to pretend everything was fine. How I no longer had to wonder if the woman next to me in bed was thinking about someone else. How I no longer had to fight for someone who had already let me go. Then, on the third day, I got another message from her. Not a call. Not an apology. Just a short, clipped text. When can I come get my stuff? That was it. No, how are you? No acknowledgement of everything that had happened. Just business. And maybe that was for the best. I stared at the screen for a second, then typed back, me, tomorrow. I won't be here. I'll leave the key under the mat. Take what you need and leave the key inside when you're done. No response. Fine. The next morning I left early, just like I said I would. I didn't want to be there. I didn't want to see her. I spent the day doing normal, boring things, grabbing coffee, running errands, walking around the city with no real destination. And by the time I got back home that evening, she was already gone. And so was half the house. The closet was empty. Her dresser drawers pulled open, stripped bare. The bathroom shelves where all her makeup and perfume used to be, cleared out. The entire place felt gutted. But the worst part? She took the photos. Not just the ones of us together. She took the framed pictures of our wedding. The vacation photos. Even the ones with my family, like she was erasing herself from my life completely. And maybe in her mind she was. I stood there for a long moment, staring at the blank spaces on the walls. Then I noticed something on the kitchen counter. Her wedding ring. Just sitting there. No note. No explanation. Just left behind like an afterthought. I picked it up, turning it over in my fingers. Then I opened the trash can and dropped it inside. I didn't feel anything when it hit the bottom. No sadness. No regret. Just the undeniable truth that I had finally closed the door on the life I thought we had. And I was never opening it again. The house was quiet. Not the uncomfortable, heavy silence that had filled it before, but something else, something lighter. Final. She was gone. Really gone. No more waiting for her to come home late, no more listening for the sound of her voice in another room, no more pretending that things weren't falling apart while I stood in the wreckage of a marriage that had already been over long before I ever admitted it to myself. I took one last look at the empty space where our framed photos used to hang, then turned away. It didn't matter anymore. She could take whatever she wanted. None of it meant anything now. I went to bed that night and slept better than I had in months. The next morning, I woke up to a clear sky and a sense of clarity that I hadn't felt in years. No tightness in my chest. No anxiety gnawing at the back of my mind. No dread about what fresh disappointment the day might bring. Just silence. The kind that belonged to me. I made coffee, sat by the window, and for the first time in a long time, I thought about what comes next. Not about her. Not about the past. Me. Because that's what this was really about now, wasn't it? Reclaiming my life. I had spent so much time trying to save something that was already dead. Pouring energy into a woman who didn't love me anymore. Trying to be enough for someone who never actually wanted this version of me. And now I didn't have to do that anymore. There was a strange kind of freedom in that. I grabbed my phone and sent a text to Ryan. Me, you busy today? A few seconds later, my screen lit up. Ryan, not at all. What's up? I stared at the message for a second before typing back. Me, let's go do something. Something new. It didn't matter what. It didn't matter where. I just knew that for the first time in a long time, I had no one to answer to. No one to wait for. No one holding me back. The future was mine again, and I was finally ready to start living it.